Hey, everybody. It's Brian again. Thanks so much for coming back. This is part two of the Misbehavior Managed program. Hopefully, you've had an opportunity to look at part one. If you haven't done so, please go back and look at that. Otherwise, like most sequels, this one may not make a ton of sense. Where we ended last time is we were talking a little bit about the importance of the relationship. And hopefully you've had a chance to put in practice a few of the things that we talked about last time so that you have the opportunity to change what you can about the relationship. I want to begin with a dirty little secret. And the dirty little secret is this. A lot of the parents that I work with, many of whom I think are really wonderful parents and wonderful people, will confide in me that they love their kids, but sometimes they don't like their kids. And by love their kids, I mean they walk through fire for them. But sometimes it's hard for them to really like their kids. Now, there might be a lot of reasons for that, not just one or two, but maybe one potential reason for that is this negative association we get by being around our kids. Now, this will happen if you're engaged in a lot of drunk brain conversations with your kids. If you're involved in a lot of drunk brain conversations, eventually you're going to associate your kids with punishment and you are going to try to avoid them. Remember that let sleeping dogs lie impulse? Yeah, that'll happen. So one of those things that we want to do is, again, I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but it's important to remember you don't have to swing at every pitch, okay? You don't have to make a big deal out of every eye roll, every attitude thing that the kid does. Like most batters in baseball, good batters in baseball know not to swing at every pitch. Similarly, it's important that parents not swing at every pitch, at every eye roll and every kind of grumble that the kid gives you. Otherwise, and I apologize for being crude for just a moment, the idea is this: never get in a pissing contest with somebody who can outpiss you. And your kid can outpiss you, I promise. I mean, they've got more energy than you. They don't have a job. They don't have as much on their agenda. You know, if you tell them no, they have nothing else but just to push your buttons. So it's just something to remember, so that way we can kind of have a different vibe in the relationship, because as I mentioned last time, the relationship is really important. Now, I know that's probably not what you tuned in for. What you tuned in for was the good stuff. And what I mean by the good stuff is teach me how to ground my kid, teach me how to provide consequences. And we are going to get there today. But again, the stuff we talked about last time is foundational. And if that's not working, nothing else will. Sometimes in my clinical practice, I'll have parents come to me, and at the very beginning of the session, they'll tell me that their kid basically lives in a bare room. Like the kid has so grounded themselves that the parent has taken away all the books, all the clothes, all the toys. Basically, the kid just lives in a room that doesn't even have a door and just has a mattress. And that's kind of where they are as far as consequences. And a lot of the times the difficulty in those bare room situations is first reconstructing the relationship, because you can take away everything from a kid. And if the relationship is in the red, so to speak, it really won't matter. So the challenge we have today, though, in this particular talk, is to figure out a way to hold the child accountable without getting into drunk brain with the kid. It's easier said than done, but it's something that we have to do, because as I mentioned last time, lectures are not accountability. If lectures worked, I wouldn't have a job. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about different ways to hold the kid accountable without getting into drunk brain with the kid. So let me go ahead and start my presentation. Okay. All right. So hopefully you're seeing this along with me. Okay. So we are in, last time we talked about drunk brain scenario number one. Now we're in drunk brain scenario number two. This is when you want something. You want them to do their room or clean their room. You want them to do their homework, or you're trying to get them to stop doing what they like and start doing something that they don't like. Now, for the record, the kid would love it if you just ignored, as I kind of described it last time. Like you go up to a kid, you say, "Hey, I need you to make your bed." The kid doesn't want to make the bed. And when the kid uses bad voice, bad face, bad words, you say, "I'll talk to you later when you can talk to me nice." I'd be like, cha-ching, right? So we need to have a different approach when it's you wanting something. You want them to get something done that they don't intrinsically want to do. But we don't want to get into the drunk brain thing. And ignoring has its limitations. So let's think of it like this. Drunk brain scenario two, let's think of it in two categories. There's category A and category B. Now, category A are what we call transitions, which, as I reminded you last time we talked about, is when the kid is doing something they enjoy, and we, being the killjoy that we are as parents, come in and say, "Hey, stop doing this thing you like." Legos, TV watching. For me, it's when I'm watching football and my wife comes up to me and says, "Hey, you need to start mowing the lawn like you promised." Okay. And then you want them to start doing something that they don't want, like chores or something like that. Okay. That's transitions. Now, the second category of drunk brain scenario number two is when you're giving them a command. You're phrasing it nicely. You're not, phrasing it in a negative way, but you want them to do something. I'm going to use as my example, please make your bed. Bed making may not be a thing in your house, which is fine. I'm just going to use it as my example. So what I want to do is I want to first kind of talk about category A, which is your transitions. Okay. Now, there's something I call grandma's rule. When I went to visit my grandmother, I would always try to talk her into allowing me to eat ice cream first. And then I promised her I would eat my broccoli later. Now, my grandmother, being the type of woman she was, she never fell for it. Now, that didn't stop me from asking because, I'm a kid and it's my job to push boundaries, and it's her job to hold the boundaries with kindness. And she was good at that. I would ask if I could have ice cream first and promise, "Grandma, I'll definitely eat my broccoli." And she would just smile and say, "Nice try." And then she'd say, "Eat your broccoli and then you can have ice cream." In other words, she wouldn't swing at the pitch. She wouldn't be like, "Brian, we've talked about this 300 times. I've never fallen for it. Why are you going on about this?" No, she didn't get drunk brain with me like that. She would just smile and say, "Nice try, eat the broccoli, then you can have ice cream." And then she would just change the subject, to something else. So I was trying to push the boundaries. She held the boundaries with some kindness. She did a good job of that. So we got the same kind of situation going here with our transitions. We got to follow grandma's rule, which means, as the slide says, you got to restructure the environment or schedule so that the child has to first do something, or at least part of something that they don't want, before they get access to something they do want, the metaphorical ice cream. Okay. So a surprising number of parents will come to me and say the following. They'll say, "I can't get the kid to start their homework." And I'm like, "Okay, that's a problem." But when I peel back the layers of the onion, what really happens is the kid comes home and says, "Mom, let me go ahead and play Xbox first. Okay. And I promise I'll do homework afterwards." In other words, let me have ice cream first and I promise I'll eat broccoli. And a lot of parents actually fall for that. Now, to be fair, I don't have a problem with a kid coming home for 15, 20 minutes and just having some relaxation time. But you're setting yourself up for failure if you get a kid started on something they enjoy and then you expect them to come in and transition to something else. So you got to follow grandma's rule. And what that means is you got to have them do part of their homework first before they have access to the Xbox. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult, right? And yeah, they're going to roll their eyes. Hey, look, I'm 49, and when I'm watching Saturday football and my wife says, "Hey, you got to transition from this to doing, the lawn, like you said," I got a PhD in this stuff, and I'm kind of like, "Oh, all right." But my wife, Bless her heart, she doesn't swing at the pitch. She just says, yeah, that's hard. And she lets me go. So the same thing needs to be set up at home. Restructure the environment so that they have to do at least part, maybe not the whole thing, but part of what they don't want to do before you give them access to ice cream. That's got to be the new standard. Otherwise, it's going to make some difficulties for you. Now, the virtue of egg timers is a reminder to me on here that you can basically go up to them and say, look, I need you to do 15 minutes of this hard task. I'm going to set an egg timer. As long as you're working, your time is going. And the reason why that's good is if you are working for 15 solid minutes and you don't like dawdle or like start doing a martyr thing, woe is me, your time is moving. And as long as your time is moving, once the 15 minutes is up, then you get 15 minutes access to ice cream, whatever that is, playtime or Xbox or whatever. So that way they have to do part of it, right? Now, even if you do this, sometimes you might have the kid get part of it done, but then you put a limit on how much time they can spend at the Xbox. Well, what do you do then? Well, I think it's helpful to have the egg timer again, but this time you go up to them after they've already gotten all of their broccoli out of the way, and you say, look, we're going to have to transition. So I'm going to set the timer here for 10 minutes before we're going to have to go, the game's going to go bye-bye. So at 5 minutes, start saving your game, right? And that way you're kind of like a timekeeper. You know, once the clock is starting to go like 2 or 3 minutes left, you come in the room and say, hey, 2 or 3 minutes, it's done. And then you just start counting backwards from 10 to 1, and then you just shut it off and leave, right? Now, they're going to go drunk brain on you, but you just kind of remove access to what you wanted because you gave them plenty of notice, about a 10-minute notice of it, right? But again, remember to repair the relationship, 1 to 5. So later, look for those 5 opportunities to fill their love bucket or to do something else to let them know, just to repair what happened before. So that's kind of the best way to help with transitions when you can. Can't always, but a couple of things to be thinking about. But what about commands? Okay, that's the second part of this, is how do you deal with commands? Now, first of all, I should say that commands should be age appropriate and small, okay? And try not to put a lot of lectures with commands. A bad command is something like, bed making has always been an important part of human society, and it really helps teach responsibility. What do you think? See, I don't have a clue what you just asked, right? Because you put a lot of lecturing in there. Look, make commands short and sweet. Hey, Johnny, I need you to start making your bed, please. Okay? It's kind, it's good voice, good face, good words, but there's not a lot of extra kind of baggage in there. But there are 3 questions you need to ask yourself before you even give the command. Okay, and these are important. So the first question to ask yourself is, do I have time to follow through? If you don't have time to follow through, don't give the command. Like if you know that if you're not out of the house in 5 minutes, you're going to get fired, repress the urge to go up to Johnny and say, hey, we got to go get started on making the bed, please. When you know from history that Johnny is going to resist. I mean, that's where the biggest blowups happen in families, is when parents can't help themselves and ask a kid to do something that the parent is under a time crunch for. What I would have the parent do instead is just go up to Johnny and say, look, you need to make your bed, but we got to go. So we'll talk later. You scoop them up, you go, and later you ask Johnny to do the bed. It doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you're busy. Okay. So if you don't have time to follow through with the other stuff we're going to talk about in a minute, don't give the command. All right. Second question is, do I have eye contact? Here's the situation. Mom's in one room, Johnny's in another room playing the Xbox or whatever. Mom's in this room saying, hey, Johnny, we got to get ready for dinner. And Johnny says, okay, Mom, you know, in that autopilot kind of way that kids do. Mom, still in the other room, says, Johnny, get ready for dinner. Okay, Mom. This happens 4 or 5 times. Mom is hot now. She's really angry. She goes in the other room. She looks at Johnny. She says, Johnny, why aren't you getting ready for dinner? And then Johnny looks at Mom with that kind of dumb expression that parents love and says, I don't know. Why didn't Johnny get ready? Because he didn't hear you. He didn't hear you. I mean, you thought he was hearing you because he was saying things like, okay, mom, but the truth and reality was he didn't hear anything that you were really saying. Okay, so let's check this. Okay, all right, just needed to check that. So one of the things that you want to be able to do here is say, do you have eye contact? Now, do you have eye contact just basically means that you're actually in the room. You got to go in the room and say, Johnny, pause the game. He pauses the game and you say, I need you to start making your bed, please. Okay? Just like that. Because otherwise, it'll help you avoid that whole stupid conversation about whether or not he heard you, right? And that's important. The third question you ask yourself before you give the command is it worth it? I mean, not all hills are worth dying on. And if you're co-parenting with a spouse or whomever, my general rule of thumb is this: it has to be worth it to both of you. In other words, if bed making is a thing for you, but it's not for the child's father, don't go and send the father to go get the child to do the bed, because the child will read that dad doesn't give a crap. And then they'll just exploit that difference between the two of you. Make sure you and your co-parent are on the same page that the hill is actually worth dying on. Otherwise, it just kind of creates a level of tension that maybe doesn't need to be there. So you have to have 3 yeses. Yes, you have eye contact. Yes, you have time to follow through. Yes, it's worth it. Now, when you get to the command itself, sometimes you can provide what's called choice commands. If you're familiar with Love and Logic, they focus on this a lot. Choice commands means you give the kid 2 options, both of which you're okay with. Hey, Johnny, you can make your bed now, or you can make it after such and such. That's just an example. You can, if you're really into it, you can provide them 3 different options. But it's not always possible to do that. So it's okay every once in a while to just give them a command like, hey, I need you to start making your bed now, please. That's okay. But the general idea with this, and the thing we want to stay away from because we don't want to get into drunk brain, is this. Hey, Johnny, if you don't do X, then Y will happen. Okay? You just give him the consequence and give him some time to kind of think about it. Now, let's kind of talk about 2 different consequences you can use. One is timeout, you're probably familiar with. The other one is practice. Now, first of all, I want to say timeout is usually better for the 7 and younger crowd, but I like this this diagram, I guess. So let's say we've got 3 yeses and we give the command, hey, Johnny, please make your bed. Now, at this point, I want you to start counting backwards in your mind from 10 to 1. 10, 9, 8. Now, you don't count out loud because that freaks out some kids, but instead you just count in your mind. Now, this is actually to occupy your mind so that you don't get into a drunk brain argument, because remember, Johnny, what he's going to do is he's going to start arguing with you, he's going to start ignoring you, or he's going to start having a tantrum, essentially. Any of those 3 falls in the non-compliance arrow, okay? Now, if Johnny listens, which means his feet are moving, okay? He's grumbling about it. He's not very attitude friendly about it, but he's moving in the right direction. Praise him anyhow. Don't swing at the pitch. Just ignore all that garbage and say, hey, look, thanks for listening to me. It means a lot to me. Because you know what? His feet are moving in the right direction. So, hey, let's celebrate the win. But if he's not moving in the right direction, then we give our warning. Our warning is that if-then statement that I talked about on the other slide. Hey, Johnny, if you don't start making the bed, then you're going to go to timeout. What do you want to do? And then you start counting backwards in your mind again from 10 to 1. 10, 9, 8. Now, one of 2 things is going to happen. He's either going to comply, which means his feet are moving, and if so, you praise him. But if his feet aren't moving, then that's non-compliance. It's non-compliance. And what you got to do is you got to put him in timeout. Now, with kids younger than 7, what will happen is, remember, you're in the room, right? You're not calling from another room. So you're already in the room. You're getting prepped for timeout. And then you start coming at them at this point, and they'll be like, fine, I'll make the bed. Nope, that ship has sailed. They have to go to timeout. Now, you leave the bed as it is. You don't go make the bed for him, but you put him in timeout, and you see that little line that connects timeout to the command? Super important. A lot of parents say to me that timeout doesn't work. And what that really means is that the parent has basically gotten in a 10-minute drunk brain conversation with the kid, pleading their case over and over again. And then it takes the kid forever to calm down and time out because you've metaphorically put gasoline on the fire, and then the fire took forever to put out. So first of all, we got to shorten the time between the command and the consequence, which in this case is timeout. And the second reason why timeout doesn't work is because the kid goes into timeout. And by the way, quick side note, the time doesn't start until the kid's been calm for about, 15, 20 seconds. And then it's about 1 minute per age. So if we're talking about a 6-year-old, about 6 minutes in timeout. And then once they've done their time in timeout, then you let them out of timeout, and then you immediately say, please start making your bed. 10, 9, 8, right? Johnny's freaking out. You give the warning again. Hey, Johnny, if you don't start making your bed, then you go to timeout. What do you want to do? 10, 9, 8. See, this way, timeout isn't an escape from not making the bed, but instead something that Johnny has to do in addition to making his bed. That's the other reason why timeout doesn't work, is because a lot of times kids will go in timeout and then the parent will go make the bed for the kid, which means that timeout becomes an escape, not a consequence. Now, as I mentioned, I like that little diagram because it helps us keep out of our drunk brain as parents. But as I mentioned, with the 7 and up crowd, we might need something else. Generally, I only, if a kid is 8 and up, I don't use timeout unless they've been violent, right? They're breaking something or they're hurting themselves. They might need to have some calm down time there. But otherwise, I find that using something called practice is better. Okay. Now, practice, just to give you some ideas here of what practice is, okay, is we're going to use the same kind of concept here, but instead it'll sound like this. Hey, Johnny, I need you to start making your bed, please. He ignores you. He tries to bait you into an argument. You don't swing at that pitch. Instead, you just do a warning. Hey, Johnny, if you don't start making your bed, then you're going to get practice making your bed. What do you want to do? 10, 9, 8. Again, if he's not moving, then you have to call practice. Now, this is where it gets different. Put practice instead on this little sheet for timeout. What practice is that if you don't want to do what I'm asking now, you can do what I ask later twice at a time that's super inconvenient for you later. Okay. Now, I know this isn't immediate, but bear with me. So I'm asking Johnny to make the bed. Okay. He's saying no. And I will basically say, all right, you chose practice. I'm going to walk away. All right. Now, at first, Johnny's going to feel like he won. But hold up. He didn't. It's okay. I'm going to walk away from Johnny. I'm going to go secure his stuff, whatever he's going to want to play with. And I'm going to go tell my co-parent, my wife, husband, whomever, I'm going to go up to them and say, hey, Johnny has practice with bed making. Okay. So you don't waste time getting into a drunk brain argument with Johnny. Instead, you announce practice, you walk away, secure their stuff, communicate with your co-parent of what the plan is, make sure you're on the same page. Because eventually, it may take an hour, may take 2, may take longer, but eventually Johnny's going to come up to one or both of you and he's going to use the magic words. Now, in this case, the magic words are not please, they are can I? Can I go to my friends? Can I get on the Xbox? Can I have ice cream? I mean, these might be can I's that you might be okay with. And if you've got a kid in elementary school, if you look for it, they probably ask the magic words of can I in some variety at least 20 times a day. Now, when Johnny comes up to me 2 hours later and says, can I go to my friends? Am I going to say no? No. What I'm going to say is this. I'm going to say, Johnny, yes, you can as soon as you make your bed twice. What does that mean? It means you make it once. I'm going to watch you, by the way. You make it once, and then I'm going to mess it up, and then you get to practice making it again. Because remember 2 hours ago how you didn't want to do it? Well, you need to just get some practice doing it. And oh my gosh, Johnny's going to flip out. I mean, you thought he was drunk brain before. Now he's really going to go drunk brain. But, haha, now you are an expert in what to do when Johnny's drunk brain, right? Remember how you don't swing at the pitch? Remember how you're going to walk away, right? Instead, because now he wants something. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had to ask you the can I question. You know, he wants to go to his friends. And you're not going to ground him. You're never again going to say to a kid something so dumb as you are grounded for 2 weeks. Because if you do that, you're drunk, number one. And number two, it's more punishing for you than it is for them. No, Johnny's grounded from his friends, but he gets to decide how long he stays grounded. Never you. It can be 5 minutes or 5 days. It's kind of up to Johnny. By the way, make sure practice is something he could legit get done with in about 5 minutes, right? So that if you're not there with him in the drunk brain argument, he'll eventually cool down and say, let me just get this stupid thing done. And then there's been an atonement. He's done it, and then he can get himself ungrounded rather than you being the perpetual bad guy about it. Now, I want to warn you, some kids are very tricky. Don't be surprised if when you announce practice and Johnny comes up to you later, or more appropriately, Johnny's going to make a beeline for the parent that wasn't there, right? But you've already communicated to that parent, right? So he goes up to the parent that wasn't there and says, bye, Dad, I'm going to go to my friends. And Dad says, you can after you make your bed twice because you told your mom no before. Johnny's going to do one of two things. He's going to either say, oh, Dad, Mom doesn't understand me like you. Try to play on Dad. Does Dad swing at that pitch? Does Dad argue with drunk people? Does Dad go off about how he was when he was a young kid and how he would have never gone away with that? Nope. He still says, oh, you're probably right. I'll talk to you about it later after you get your bed made twice. And walks away. That's one thing that kids will do. Second thing kid will do, they go up to Dad, they say, hey, I'm going to go to my friends. Dad says, after you make your bed twice. And the kid says, fine, I'll never go to my friends again. Is that what you want, Dad? Now that's an invitation to drunk brain, where you're going to get into lecture mode and talk about the value of friendship, blah, 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 blah. Nope, don't swing at the pitch. Instead, keep walking. And as you're walking away, say, that's cool. You're going to need me for something eventually. Because they will. Eventually, they're going to need you for something. Now, sometimes kids are stubborn, and they might sit on their bed and be like, I'm on my bed and it's not made, just as an invitation for you to get into drunk brain with them. Don't take the bait. Don't swing at the pitch. Eventually, they're going to need you for something. And that's where practice comes in. One of the reasons why I like practice is because they get to decide how long they stay grounded, but they also get to show appropriate behavior to get ungrounded. And I think that's important. Now, here are some potential problems that can happen with practice, okay? The first problem that can happen is parents will announce practice, but then they make the mistake of staying there and trying to talk the kid into it. Don't. That defeats the purpose, because then you're going to get into this negative drunk brain relationship. Of course, the kid is going to think it's stupid. Of course, the kid's going to think it's stupid. What did you think they were going to do? Hey, wow, Dad, that was really good limit setting. I really appreciate how you put me in my place. What? Said no kid ever. No kid ever, right? So your job after you announce practice is not to stay there and make the drunk brain kid get it, make him think it's a good idea. No, instead, your job is to walk away as calmly as you can. You may have to repress your feelings and do some deep breathing, but go and remove access to things that you can control. You can't control everything. We're not going to strip the kid's room bare, okay? Just a few things like plugs from Xboxes or remote controls from TVs, or lock up the bike if he uses the bike to go to friends. Just remove access to a few things and coordinate. Go and talk to, if you're coordinating or if you're co-parenting, go and talk to that co-parent and say, hey, Johnny's got some practice for bed making, right? Second thing that could go wrong is overdoing it, basically. Again, make sure practice is legitimately something Johnny could do within 5 minutes if he was of the mind to. He can make his bed twice, or he can practice closing the door quietly 10 times in a row. Or, oh, here's my favorite. Johnny doesn't want to get ready for bed, right? Okay, so you go up to Johnny, you say, hey, please get ready for bed. He says no, he argues with you. You're like 3, 2, 1. Please make your bed, or you're gonna get practice, or I'm sorry, let me say again. Please get ready for bed, or you're going to get practice getting ready for bed. Johnny's like, that's stupid. I won't do it. It's stupid just like you. And you don't swing at that pitch. You're just like 3, 2, 1. Okay, you got practice getting ready for bed. You pick up Johnny as he is. You put him in bed. You say goodnight. You shut out the lights. I know his teeth aren't brushed. I know his bed isn't, his prayers aren't said. I know you haven't done the routine. Let it pass. Let it pass for that one night. The next morning, Saturday, he comes up to you with his can I. Hey, can I go to my friends? Sure, after you practice getting ready for bed. Well, that's stupid. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't matter. You didn't listen to me last night. I'm not doing that. You're gone. He's breaking the good voice, good face, good words rule. You say, all right, I'll talk to you later when you want to get it done, right? And what does he have to do to practice? He has to get on his jammies, brush his teeth, and get into bed. And then he got to get out of it. He's got to get back in his regular clothes, get on his jammies again, brush his teeth, get back into bed. Practice even though it's 10 a.m. You'll only have to do it once. And the next time it's ready for bed, you say, hey, look, you can get ready for bed now, or you can get practice getting ready for bed. That's cool. He will remember that better than any lecture you have ever given him. This is why the military does this. Seriously. But don't overdo it. I've had some parents that are like, the kid didn't want to mow the lawn, so I tried to make him do it 5 times. I'm like, wow, that's overkill. You may as well have just grounded them for 2 weeks. Make sure that if they are of the mind to, they could legitimately get it done in about 5 minutes. The other problem sometimes happens is you got to remember to follow through later, right? So get a whiteboard and put down what they have practice on so that you and the co-parent, if you have one, can remember that the next time they use the magic words of can I, you go right to the whiteboard and say, well, let me see if you can. Okay, your mom wrote this, so do that twice. Mom's so horrible. I know, we'll talk about it later. Get that done twice, and then we'll talk about it. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Get your feet moving. Okay. The other thing that makes practice not work is that people neglect the 1-to-5 ratio afterwards. Make sure that you still follow through on that. And then next, don't stack your practice. So when you ask them to do one thing, get them ungrounded first before you ask them to do other things. Otherwise, what happens is, okay, you got practice now for bed making and for getting ready for bed and for doing your homework and this and that. And you may as well ground them for 2 weeks. There's too many things to keep track of. So don't stack the practice. Have them get done with one before you ask them to do other things that they're probably going to say no to. That's why those 3 questions before giving a command are so important. And then, can you problem solve with them later? You know, once they're not in drunk brain, yeah, you can teach when the relationship is good. You can go back later when they've already done the practice. And so, you know, the consequences off the table, and they're going to be much more receptive to what could we have done differently next time. But they're not going to be receptive if you try to do it with them when they're still kind of drunk. Can I include rewards? Sure. I've had people that have used sticker charts and things like that, but the kid only gets the sticker if they listen the first time. If they don't and you have to call practice, then obviously you don't get rewards for that. And then you can always talk later. On the bottom of this slide, it says the 1-5-30 ratio. What does that mean is that for every one time you have to do in practice, look for your 5 opportunities to connect with them. And then if you feel like that teaching impulse is there, then you have 30 seconds to make your point. You know, this assumes, by the way, that practice is done and that you've connected with them again. Then if you need to, go back and say, hey, Johnny, I want to talk about the whole getting ready for bed thing. Do you know why I was upset? And then they might give you the lecture you were planning on giving them so that you don't even have to do the 30 seconds thing. But if you feel like you need to give them some teaching, just keep it short. Just keep it short. You know, 30 seconds is usually enough for elementary school kids because chances are you've already told it to them about 300 times, you know. All right. So third drunk brain scenario. So what do we got? First drunk brain scenario is they want something and you told them no. And so now they're going to push your buttons or try to get attention. Second, you wanted something, which is you wanted them to do this command or transition. And here's the third one. The third one is they're busted. You caught them red-handed doing something wrong. Okay. Now at this place, there's no command, you know, there's no warning because, well, they've already done it, right? So instead of if you don't do X, like make your bed, then you'll get Y practice. It's you did X, so you get Y, right? So look, Johnny, I saw you hit your sister, so you get timeout. Put them in timeout. You know, don't do a lot of lecturing in between there. Don't do a lot of teaching. It's just, look, you did this, so you get this. After the consequence is done, we'll talk about it. Short and sweet, have it done so you're not into a drunk brain conversation. And you can say to him something like, look, you're a good kid who made a poor choice. We'll talk after the punishment is done, right? Now, one of the things I have on this slide is how to make a kid a liar. Okay, now a lot of parents come to me and say, I think my kid is a chronic liar. They got a problem with this. Here's the thing. A lot of those same parents, and they don't mean to, but the reason why their kid has a problem with lying is because the parent goes up to the kid and asks them something that the parent already knows the answer to. I mean, that's a good way to make a kid a liar. So let's go back to Johnny hit his sister. You were in the other room. You saw him hit his sister. Repress the urge to go in the room and entrap him by saying, did you hit your sister? Because of course Johnny's going to lie about it. He's drunk. Of course he's going to lie about it. I mean, it's entrapment what you're just doing, right? So don't go in and say, did you hit your sister when you know he hit his sister. Just go in and say, look, you hit your sister, you got timeout, we'll talk about why later. Put him in timeout, let the dust settle, and then you can go back and later and teach when the relationship is good, right? So a general rule of thumb is don't ask them questions you already know the answer to. If Johnny's teacher called you and said, Johnny spit on somebody today, at the end of the day, don't go up to him and say, so how was your day? You know how his day was, right? So just go up to him and say, look, your teacher called me, you spit on somebody, here's the consequence. We'll talk later about how to make better choices. Implement the consequence, go back later, teach when the relationship is good, which means you have done the 1-to-5 ratio, okay? Now, why is this so important? We got to be careful about shame. Nobody likes to get their face rubbed in the mud. Imagine you had a boss who was hovering over you, and every time you made a mistake, the boss was like, oh, you just did something wrong. Hey, let's relive how wrong you were in front of everybody. In fact, I'll call a few coworkers in, and we can talk about how wrong you were. Even if you have the patience of Gandhi, won't you eventually be like, okay? Now, in this situation, what if the boss was like, oh, wow, you had a little bit of an attitude just then. I think I'm going to refer you to anger management, maybe make you go to see a therapist. Sometimes this is what we do with kids. They mess up. They know they've messed up, and we rub their face in the mud, like this obnoxious boss that I was just talking about. And then we are shocked when they explode. Well, yeah, of course they explode, right? So am I saying that you let Johnny off the hook for hitting his sister? No. You can give him consequences. But let's be mindful that kids are really receptive to shame. Shame is the great igniter of drunk brain. I don't care how old you are. Now, you can always problem solve later, which means after you repair the relationship, 1-to-5, you can say, hey, Johnny, and remember, at this point, Johnny's already done his practice, timeout, whatever, right? So he doesn't have that hanging over his head, which means he's going to be more receptive to your teaching. And you can say something like, hey, before I kind of talk about what I wish you would have done differently, tell me what was going on when you hit Jenny. Like, what happened? You can normalize the story by saying, okay, I get why you would be angry. Most kids are angry, but I'm just curious. I don't understand, because sometimes that doesn't happen for you. Help me understand it. And then you can come to an agreement and say, okay, what do you think we should do the next time you hit her? Give me an idea of what we should do differently. How can I help differently? This, hopefully, as the kid matures, gives them permission to engage with the problem-solving process. So it's not just you pushing it on them, but they have a stake in it. But all that is based on timing. You got to do it later when the relationship is good. And quite honestly, some parents are so busy, they don't circle back to it. It's hard to. It's difficult. All right, let's go with our summary as we wrap up here. Here's a couple of the summary slide. First, again, teach when the relationship is good. I know I've said it a million times. I'm going to say it again. Teach when the relationship is good, because they're not going to remember anything you say if it's in any of the drunk brain scenarios. Number two, remember to follow up with that 1-to-5 ratio. It's hard to do. I get it. And it doesn't have to be big, but little ways of filling their love bucket go a long way. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be a perfect angel, though. And so sometimes, as a way to figure out what drunk brain scenario you're in, I have parents ask themselves this: who wants something? Is it the kid who just got told no? Or is it me wanting something? If the kid just got told no, you're in drunk brain scenario number one. If it's you who want something, either with a command or a transition, drunk brain scenario number two. Or has the bad thing already happened? If so, implement the consequence, teach later. You're in drunk brain scenario number three. Okay. Again, if they're busted, just provide a consequence, but don't rub their face in the mud, because nobody likes that, and neither do your kids. I do hope that you're willing to start slow and be patient with yourself. That's why I broke up this presentation into two things, because there's a lot here, right? Remember, you're a good parent. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten this far. I truly believe that about you. And also remember that the repair is more important than the rupture. You will sometimes say drunk brain things. I do. I absolutely do. But I also try to own it later and repair it later, because sometimes non-compliance is really about non-connection. Remember our bare room kid? We don't want to be in that space, because it's harder, not impossible, but it's harder to come back from. Now, here's where you might need more help. There's only so much I can do in a couple of videos. So here are some times where you may need more help. First is if there's severe trauma, especially before the age of 5. This activates what we call attachment issues. And especially if the kid was exposed to frightening experiences early in their life and repeated, you probably are going to need more than just a couple of videos. This is where we need some professional help on board. Not that the things we've talked about are bad, but you'll probably need a little bit more. The second is if they've never been able to relate to people. ASD stands for autism spectrum disorder. These are kids who cannot deal with sensory stimulation, and they don't have the drive for connection that most kids have. That might be something where you need a little bit more support. Obviously, if threats, including threats of homicide, suicide, continue and might include actual violence to themselves or others, you probably need a little bit more support. If the defiant behaviors include cruelty, like cruelty to animals, a lack of remorse, and it's not that they're doing the bad thing because they're drunk, but they actually plan it out. That's something called conduct disorder or sociopathy, and that definitely needs a higher level of support. And these last two are important. So if the family interactions have become so toxic that the parent cannot find positive times to teach, it might be time to do some family therapy sessions and figure out why the parent maybe is having that difficulty. Maybe it's something in their own past that's getting in the way. And then the last one is when the parent's impulses are too big. If the parent is struggling with drug or alcohol, bipolar disorder, or borderline personality issues, or something like that, therapy may be required, because as we've talked about, managing kids' behavior means managing our impulses sometimes as well. That's our information. If you need further help or resources, that's our website right there. That's our phone number. And we have locations both in Centerville and Layton, if that's something you're interested in. I want to finish with this. This is The Medicine's Woman Prayer by Melanie Mackey. I think it applies a lot to child rearing. I will not rescue you, for you are not powerless. I will not fix you, for you are not broken. I will not heal you, for I see you in your wholeness. I will walk with you through the darkness as you remember the light. Kids are like this pear tree over here. Trees, you can prune them, you can plant them, you can nurture them, but you're not going to prune a pear tree into a rose bush. Sometimes we have to accept kids as they are, not as we wish they would be. And so if we can remember that our job is to not be a sculptor that slams rough edges off with violence, but instead we're a kindly gardener that prunes a little bit from here and there, but gives the kid the nurturance they need to grow into whoever they need to be. Even if it's not the rose bush we thought, then we're able to get through this marathon called parenting. We're able to relate to our kids, and we're able to form that connection with them that is so vital as we go forward. I really appreciate your attention and time and looking at all this. I know it's kind of a lot to go through, but feel free to reach out if there are other things that I can do to be helpful. Thank you so much. Take care.